Welcome to the Virtual College Fair for all Hawaii students. Thank you for joining us. A few housekeeping announcements before we get started. You can use the Q&A button on your screen to type your questions to our presenters at any time. Your camera and microphone are off, so the panelists cannot see or hear you. This is just one of many different sessions happening, so be sure to check out the full schedule at strivescan.com/Hawaii. This presentation is being recorded and will be available within about a week at that same website. I'd now like to turn it over to our presenters.
Hi, everyone. Let me have just a quick minute to pull up a presentation for all of you. Hopefully you can all see that. This is a session that really matters a lot to people like us who work in college admissions. Very quickly, I'll just say that there's very little opportunity sometimes to get us to be familiar and aware of who you are as a student and as a person. So having this opportunity to explain to you what we think the strength and the importance of a good essay is, or in the case of where I work at the UC system, what we call personal insight questions, the value of that is really enormous for your application for college admission. So anyway, before I say too much more, I want to introduce all of us. I want to start with our great colleague from Pomona College. Please say hello to Mr. Sapp.
Hello, everyone. Aloha. Really happy to be here. My name is Adam Sapp. I'm the Director of Admissions at Pomona College, and I also happen to be the reader for Hawaii, both Oahu and the Outer Islands. Really happy to be here today.
It's fantastic. Thank you for joining us, too. And if you've seen me, but you haven't seen my mainland look, this is me in my suit and tie on the left. This is my name, David, and my email address, should you be interested in being in touch with me. I've been coming over to Hawaii, I think 11 years. And I come from a background in actual advising, counseling, and then moved my way into admissions and do some new things now. But my colleague, Brian, is also going to say quick hello here, and he works directly with our admissions office.
Well, hello, everyone, and good morning. I know it's getting close to lunchtime, so thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. We wanted to kind of start this presentation in larger, broader, more general ways, and then maybe get into our time with you in more specific detail, and then maybe lead out of that as we can help you with some general, maybe tidbits or maybe some takeaways at the end. But I think what we'd want to do is just get into a kind of a discussion to open up with about what do we want to see from you in the way that you can express yourself in a statement. And I think you're going to hear very different perspectives because of the different colleges that we are from. So I wanted to have Adam start with that, to sort of share with us how his college really wants you to sort of lend yourself and express yourself in your own writing.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Brian. I think one of the things that is so critical in a liberal arts environment where you are learning to communicate in every form is that you learn to communicate in the written form. We actually have at Pomona College, for example, a writing center, like many colleges do. This is true whether big schools or small schools or medium-sized schools. There's always so many different kinds of support services. Writing support is one of them. But we actually changed the name of our writing center to reflect more about general communication. So it is now inclusive of writing and speaking and engagement. And so we're thinking about communication in a much broader way. And I think that that's true of the world today. Communication, whether it's in the written form, the spoken form, particularly in the written form in this workshop today, is a vital way both to get across your thoughts as well as to communicate ideas and to communicate understanding. I have a former boss who I used to work for who used to always say, how you write is how you think, and we care about how you think. And I think that's really true. We do care a lot about how you think, and whether you're UCI or whether you're Pomona or whether you're any institution of higher education, thinking is important and writing is connected to it.
Yeah, I think a lot too about my own journey as a student and then as a professional, and the evolution of how I express myself. I have a lot of trust that I'm going to find the right thing to say and the right way to say it. But I don't have that happen, just to share my own thoughts on this, just right off the bat. It doesn't come out the way I mean it to come out. Quite often for me, it's writing is rewriting. And I would tell anyone who's sort of struggling with these applications that my suspicion is that the very thing you're holding off doing is this part of the application. It's not so hard to sort of assemble some of the grades, the classes, the accomplishments, the recognitions that you received. It's when you have to express something authentic about yourself that means a little bit of work. And I think some of what I've noticed that works really well for students is when they can confront their own language by free writing. Sometimes it's just uncluttering your mind by writing whatever comes into your mind. As you move through what you're trying to find, you will kind of unclutter the things that aren't so important. And eventually you can come to the thing that really is central and significant about what you want to get across. And then that's the great thing to find and actually expand upon. So we put up a slide here about some general common mistakes that we see, at least on the University of California side. But I kind of like this way we started this with, when you do personal essay writing, unlike maybe some private colleges, UC schools will not be able to interview you. We will not have the opportunity to meet with you after you've applied and draw things out of you, sort of in a way that can happen in a back to forth discussion. So we really need your help. We need you to actually draw it out of yourself. And so I'd like you to think about your essay writing as a way of interviewing yourself instead of waiting for someone to ask you the right way or the right question so that it comes to mind and then you can share it at that point. But this puts the burden on you to really kind of confront yourself, your language, what you're thinking, and then find the central important thing that you want to share. I wanted to hear what Brian wanted to say on this point too, about, what is it that we really want to see when we say express yourself in a personal insight question or in an essay?
Thanks. Yeah, I think, this year especially, I would say that both from, Adam's side and ours, the personal statements, the essays, they've always been there. We haven't changed any of the questions, but what has changed in the college landscape is the test taking and all the other information that we see from grades and other things that a lot of schools this year are going test optional or test blind. And so this is your chance to really to give us that context and tell us more about yourself. And so I think something like this workshop is helpful because we're giving you from our perspective, what do we want to see? I think it's always easier to write when you know an expectation of what the person who's reading it wants to see. So hopefully through this, we're going to be able to give you some tips and hints and a little more insight into what we're actually looking for when you're writing these statements, because they actually become a little more magnified this coming year, especially on the UC side without the test scores. So you'll want to make sure you can maximize every opportunity to present yourself.
Adam, I just want to come back to you for a second, because I know the length of the statement that you're looking at or the essay you're looking at may be a bit different than ours. I think actually, as I know it, we have 4 answers we're getting from students, but I suspect yours is maybe just a couple, but maybe at a longer length. When you personally have come across some effective writing, what stands out to you in the way that the student has expressed themselves?
Yeah, so I think one, if you can make it as personal as possible, and there's a comfort level there, but I think you have to try. Remember, the application is about you. And I think that one of the things that I like to see is the action or the reflection or the experience that is being talked about, or even the future idea, the thing that you're passionate about, your interest, is the product of reflection, deep reflection on the things you care about and why that mattered. I think oftentimes students think that there is some kind of answer that we're looking for. And if they can just get to that answer, if they can just give us whatever the right thing is, that they will have, I don't know, checked the box on the essay, gotten it right, gotten it correct. There is no such thing as correct writing in the sense that there's an answer. There's something that's well written. There is such a thing as good writing, and I think we're all looking for good writing. But these prompts, as you'll see when we move through, are deliberately open-ended because they are asking you to reflect, and that reflection should result in some personal identity, some personal understanding coming through in your essay.
And how much of what you're looking at and what you're recognizing as helpful is about the students' personal values? Is that needed and wanted in their writing?
Yeah, I think values are one way you can do it. I think as a young person, you're 16, 17, going on 18, you've experienced some life. And that experience has given you values, given you ideas, made you think a certain way, perhaps about certain things. Perhaps maybe you're sort of unsure about other things. But there are going to be some things, whether those happen to be based in experience or based in reading or understanding, or maybe in your schoolwork that you're doing in high school, that you've come to really believe in.
Mm.
And it can be a great way to think about connecting those beliefs and maybe how those beliefs were formed with maybe a major that you have an interest in, or a career that you have an interest in, or an expectation or a hope that you have for having a college experience. I think that's really how we go through much of our young life is we stack some experience on top of some reflection, then we have some more experience, then we have some more reflection, and ideally that combination of things is the fodder, is the subject for really, really good writing.
And in the end, why does it help you as an admissions professional to see someone deliver in that way?
Oh, because I think as admissions folks, and we all three know this, we admit students and then we send you to the faculty. We admit students and we send you to your professors, to your teachers. They are absolutely expecting that you know how to express yourself.
Mhm.
Now, they don't think you need to be Mark Twain, but they do need and expect that you know how to communicate and how to articulate your ideas. And so this essay is the example that we have to say, gosh, I love those grades. I love what you're doing extracurricularly. I'm really interested in who you think you're becoming. And this writing really reveals something about you as a good fit or a good match for my institution. The teachers at our school are going to love you. And
Mhm.
that's part of the ammunition that I have whenever I'm debating you, deliberating upon you with my admissions committee.
Yeah, it's a bit different for us though, isn't it, Brian, on the UC side? Because we'll have, oh my gosh, I think we had something like 98,000 freshman apps last year. So really, essay writing for us is our opportunity to touch a bit of the individuality of a person by hearing their voice and what they say, seeing the examples that they use. I want to get back to these common mistakes because sometimes students, and I think Adam, you said this well, sometimes I took what you were saying as that people and students sometimes second guess what they should write because they play it safe and they think they can kind of steer it towards what they think we want to hear or how we want it to be
Yeah,
said.
that happens a lot.
Yeah, and then if, and that it's not that we don't understand what that's about, but if we don't have all those opportunities to know you as an individual, except at the moment we're really reading what you have to say, then it may sound like anybody's answer instead of your answer, right? So let's go through a few of these together,
Sure.
Brian, to kind of talk about the common mistakes. Let's start with this creative writing. You and I both have some funny moments we kind of bring up from time to time about students kind of starting off with a way of saying things to sound educated and intelligent, ready for college, and then it feels like it's a bit contrived and not really honest and authentic. So let me hear that example that you love to talk about.
Sure. So yeah, one of the I think what we're trying to touch upon, and Adam did a really good job of talking about, you need to talk about yourself and make it personal. And a lot of students, I think, look at this as, okay, I gotta have to wow the reader or the application person or the admissions officer by being really creative in my writing. And some of the things I've seen are things such as one student actually compared their life to a Chipotle burrito and talked about all their personalities as part of the burrito, you know, like the chicken and the lettuce and the rice and stuff like that and the beans. But it took so long in describing that we didn't actually understand anything about what they were talking about. Another time, a student said, I'm really an alien and I've been put into a body of a 17-year-old high school senior who lives in Costa Mesa or something. that's the type of thing that, yes, it is very creative, and yes, it comes from a different perspective, very different than what we normally see, but it takes so long to actually talk about yourself. You end up focusing so much on the creativity that we don't actually get something out of you. So the idea is to, I think when you're writing, if you are a creative person, it will come across naturally in your writing. It will come out creatively, where it's the balance of presenting who you are along with displaying what that creativity is. But you don't have to really come up or contrive scenarios to make it like it's a creative writing. Do not think of this like a high school essay that I know your English teachers like to give you during your senior year and say, okay, one of our assignments is you're going to write your college essay. And they're looking at it for, yes, the creativeness, the writing. Are you drawing the reader into it with some action statements and setting the setting and stuff? We're not really necessarily looking for that. Again, the idea is that we're trying to understand you. So some of those creative elements will come out of there, but you don't have to, in some ways, waste the words to talk about that.
Yeah. The second one I'm going to get into is a bit, I guess, more of what I was starting to talk about a few moments ago, is sometimes we associate what we want to say about ourselves to somebody else that we think people respect more or understand better or are more impressed by. And sometimes that person is a famous person, and sometimes that person is someone you respect a lot. It could be a family member, your father, your mother, your grandfather, your grandmother, your teacher, your principal, your counselor. But the idea that we try to say something about ourselves through other people, and sometimes that's done with quotations. And so, I try to make light of this a bit, just to take the pressure off of students that, it's okay not to have to do that. We want to hear you. We don't necessarily need to hear that Albert Einstein once said something. And I usually say, like, listen, if Albert Einstein ever comes back to the earth and he wants to apply to either Pomona College or UCI, I'm sure we'll take a real hard look at him. But if he's not, we really want to get past that and really hear what you want to say and what you can say. And if you simply, we have so few words that we give you in space to be able to talk about yourself. If you put that on top of what you share, that quotation or that reference to somebody in your life, then that's just fewer words that you can share with us about yourself in particular. The next thing is just generalities. And I love what Brian has to say about this. So get into the idea that we really want context, we want facts, and maybe just the platitudes that sometimes people like to say sound fine, but they really don't get you any further along.
Right. I think a common mistake is really just assuming the reader knows everything about you, and you're just saying, okay, I was the high school tennis champion for our league, or we won, I became ASB president. What we're really looking for, again, when you're personalizing it, is to talk about the process. Give us the road that it took to get to these places. You didn't just kind of pick up a racket one day and all of a sudden play a match and say, okay, now I'm the league tennis champ. There's a lot of effort that goes into that with, was there, how much practice did you do? Were you a team captain? Did you have to go through difficulty? Did you have to, get your schedule down? Did you maintain your grades while you were also practicing all this effort? Did you have to do other responsibilities, taking care of brother and sister, or getting a part-time job to help the family? We want to know the specifics around the process of getting there. And so I think it's always easy to just use the essays to repeat certain things that you've already told us about things in the application, but you really want to get down to the facts. Give us the details of it. Do kind of like an interview where you got to talk about yourself and think about, okay, what were the things that I did? What were the challenges that I had? And what were the outcomes from those? How much of the input did you have on that? And I think that'll help you kind of frame mind. So when you're reading it back to yourself and you write them and you have proofread, try to look and see, okay, if there's a question about a generality, is it something that I need to actually explain out a little more? Or is this something that I've already said in the application that, so you can find out somewhere else? And I've already told them that I was ASB president. So talk more about the process and the specifics surrounding these circumstances.
Yeah, the next thing really quickly is just repetition. I think Brian kind of alluded to this, is that if you've already said and mentioned that you have something that's been an accomplishment or something that's noteworthy, in some other part of your application, perhaps there's more to say, but maybe there's not all that much more to say. And maybe by saying something again about it, you're taking up again some of that space, and it's just going to become repetitive. So, really think about the new information that you haven't yet given us when you actually work on some of your essay writing, or in our case, our personal questions. We've got a few more here, but I don't want to miss out from hearing from Adam, because I'm watching him as I'm talking and I can see him shaking his head like this seems to be true for your world as well, Adam. What other mistakes do you tend to see?
Well, I think the one that is probably the most common is what I would call the movie script essay, which is, 20 seconds left to go. Someone throws a Hail Mary and I caught the pass. Or bottom of the ninth inning, the counts 3-2. I closed my eyes and swung and hit the grand slam. Save it for the movies. Let's try to do something a little less cliche. I see that word on here. I really support that. And I think even though I don't want to discount the value of those experiences, they're important. I get that. I think that you have so many other experiences you could choose that are perhaps a little more unique in terms of the framing and in terms of the storytelling capacity, that you can stay away from those and still have lots of choices.
We all work in worlds of acronyms. If you go to any college or university, it's going to be, it's going to spin your head to have to learn what is meant by something like an IUPP or something like OIT. And these are just letters. And so if you have that in your life, understand what I just said means nothing to you. And if you have a few letters in your life, it won't mean anything to us. So if you could just do us a favor of the space that you can give us and what you can share, really explain and just give us the whole word that's going with that acronym. And just philosophical questions. Sometimes I think, again, maybe in a desire to please, or thinking that we're pleasing the reader of our application, we want to suggest that we're thinking deeply about things, and then we present that in a philosophical question. But quite honestly too, when we have so many applications to read, it really helps us to sort of get things in headlines, not the back of a pill bottle. So really put something up front and really direct, and really make sure we don't miss the importance of what you're trying to tell us, and not bury it in something that feels a little bit more ethereal or a little bit more disparate for us. And then last is just inappropriate humor. If you're a humorous, funny person and that's how you tend to express yourself, I think Brian said that well, that what you are as a creative person or as a humorous person, that's just going to come through. But if you're forcing something that you think is going to land and maybe it doesn't, I would just ask all of you to just check yourself. Just make sure you talk with people you trust who can give you honest feedback, and make sure that the humor you're using actually is right and is on point, and it is not going to be distracting in any way. So any last thoughts, gentlemen, before we move on to PIQs? So we're going to go into a little bit about the UC system here, and then we're going to come back to Adam's Pomona College and finish up with how that world works with essay writing. But for the UC system, all of you who are interested in this system, you'll need to know that there are actually 9 campuses that you can consider applying to, but there's one application. So you very likely have heard of an idea of a common app. We have that idea, but just for the UC campuses themselves. And though you also need to know that even though we have 9 campuses, one set of requirements, we all review the application, that single application, independently of each other. So we don't wait for another college or university to think through what they think of you and share that with us. We don't share. We don't tell each other what we think of your application. So we have a chance to sort of think for ourselves about what it is that you're presenting to us, what is your investment in your academic preparation, and then also what is your potential to contribute to our university by virtue of anything that you've accomplished or anything that you've been involved in that's impressive and presented to us in the application. And we just encourage you to apply broadly. I mentioned how many applications we get, but many of the UCs are very popular campuses and do get lots and lots of applications. So it just makes sense to spread the risk and go ahead and think about adding a few more schools to your list of places that you might want to send the application to. So let's get into the personal insight questions themselves. We have a set of comprehensive review factors that we can use to consider your application. And maybe, I'm gonna say maybe 5 years ago, there was a move away from a little bit longer, I think we had at the time 2 personal statement essays, to make a set of 8 smaller questions, which we call the personal insight questions, and then ask you for a shorter answer to more questions. So of those 8, we ask you to actually respond to 4. Choose the 4 that you think you have something important to say. And then instead of 500 or 600 words, we're actually asking for 350 or less. Now, that's not much, right? That could be just 2 paragraphs, maybe just 1 long paragraph. So just know that how we're handling this with you is we really want you to be direct with us, put it in your own way of saying things. And that really, you can start to see what we were saying earlier about maybe skipping the philosophical statements or questions, maybe skipping the quotations, because you only have a very short amount of word count to be able to get across your ideas. And then, and understand this too, all of these questions that we provide to you, they're equal in value to us. And the decision you make about which 4 to choose will also be helpful to us to see where you put some value onto those questions or those topics in those questions. It'll say something to us about your choice, about what you're going to be answering. So I don't want you to be too worried or thinking too much about, I guess I should be answering this question and not that question, because I think they probably care more about that than that. We value them all, and we want you to choose for yourself what you decide to write about. So yeah, there's a few thoughts there. Again, Brian, I wanted you to make sure to jump in here too and give maybe a few thoughts about why things are equal for us, and also there really isn't any right or wrong in any of these answers for us.
Sure. So for the personal insight questions, the idea is that we're essentially giving you an interview just on paper and not live. So think of it as, because the University of California can't actually interview in person, what do you want to talk about yourself? So it doesn't matter which question you pick. We just want you to answer questions that you want to kind of talk about yourself in. So we kind of give you that power in terms of choice, so that amongst the 8, hopefully there's 4 questions that you can actually address different things about yourself. Almost think of it like the top 4 or 5 things I want a college admissions person to know about. How do I highlight those through these PIQs? So really, there's no wrong or right way to answer these. Honestly, it's your freedom of expression. And so one of the things that's important is that we will never penalize or so-called ding or lower an admission score because of your personal statement or anything that you write in there. Any of these answers, it won't ever cause us to actually pull back your application. What it does is that it adds value to it. So we can already see a certain number of your quantitative elements, such as like how many AP classes you've taken, your GPA, your involvements, your awards. Those are all things that you've kind of done already. But this is the area where you add more value to that, and you can actually give us more information. We're looking at context of, okay, well, what's behind the 4.0? Was it just that you, again, naturally just kind of showed up and you got A's? Or are you the person that actually worked really hard? Maybe you live far away from school. You have to wake up at 5:30, get up and have a really disciplined kind of schedule. You have to, when you go home, you can actually start your homework until 9 o'clock because you got to do all these other things, your involvements, your practices, you're taking care of mom and dad, brother and sister, whatever the situation is. Tell us about that process of what is behind the 4.0. We can see the numbers, but we can't actually see the person behind it. So that's the idea behind these insight questions, is that it's your way to tell us about those contextual information, the kind of personalized stuff that we can't see from the numbers.
And this is a bit more on this, how you see it actually in the application. So describe what we're looking at right now, Brian. What is it when a student gets to this part of the application? What should they be keying in on?
So right here, there's a couple things. When you're getting into UC, it looks overwhelmed because there's 4 out of 8 of them. The biggest thing I would say is do not compose these in the application. The application times itself out. So you can actually download the application and export this to a Word doc or email and export the questions out. And I would say spend most of your time composing outside of the application. That way it gives you a chance to write it, review it, kind of sit on it, let people proofread it for you, give it to some other people to kind of help look it over, and really think about that. It allows you to kind of plan ahead. Our application to open in August 1st, so you actually have all the way until November to submit it, and up till the end of November. So this is a chance for you to really kind of think about it. There's only 350 words, so you don't have a lot of time or actually word count to actually get information to us. So you can't go into the specifics. You really have to kind of condense it. And some of the common mistakes I see is just taking too long to set up the scenario. It's a little bit what Adam said. It's like the movie script where you take so long to set up the plot, and then all of a sudden the big action happens in the last like 10 seconds. Like, wait, what happened there? And it was just all this action, and like, but I don't understand anything that happened. So you got to really spend time a little more. I think being intentional about the wording that you're using.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, excellent. So these are sort of larger text here. These are the 8 questions that you'll have to choose from. And I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about the flavor and the I guess the idea of a few of them, just to give you a sense of the variety here. But they really do connect back to these criteria that we get to consider in your application. So they connect back to things like leadership, they connect to creativity, they connect to talents that you might have, maybe a significant educational opportunity that you've actually faced or overcome, maybe a significant challenge as well. Also, any special academic subjects that really inspire you. I can remember speaking on the road in Hawaii with a student once at a college fair, really excited about our campus because he really liked to do code and he was interested in being a information science major. And so if he had a lot of interest in that, that would be a great question for him to reflect on and maybe to frame an answer for us. Also, about how did you contribute to your school community and making it a better place? That's important to us as well. And then this last question, I think sometimes, and I say this all the time when I'm in Hawaii, is that sometimes it's not great or it's not cool to actually come across as if you're bragging too much about what you have accomplished. So sometimes I'll talk with a student at a fair and they'll really have done something amazing, but they're shy to talk about it in big ways. So in this last question, maybe it's a great opportunity for us to give you permission to do so. So as you can read it here, it says, beyond what's already been shared in your application, what do you think makes you stand out as a strong candidate? And that gives you one more chance to really come back with a direct answer that you're particularly proud of. And maybe other people have also told you that you should be proud of it too in your life. So it isn't just yourself, it's lots of people seeing this part of you. Brian, what kinds of questions or thoughts do you have about any of these questions? Any things that trip people up or anything that's an opportunity here in any of these questions?
No, I think everyone always wonders, what are the ones that I can actually think we will want to see? And again, there's no right or wrong answer. So we're not looking for a specific one that you answer or how you answer it. Again, it's all value added for this. So just again, look at some of the top things that you want to be proud of or talk about you overall from high school and see if they kind of fit into one of these areas. That way you can kind of use that to answer these questions.
Yeah, I think some of these questions, if you had, maybe let's take a look at number 1 here, describe an example of your leadership experience. If you already know this about yourself, that you enjoy leading things, whether it's clubs, organizations, maybe you're a leader on your maybe your Model UN team, maybe it's sports, maybe it's the school yearbook, whatever it is that you're into. If you see yourself as a leader, that could be an easy thing for you to tap into because it's natural, it's happening every day, and there's a lot that you can readily think to say about it. Then there's also, I think, number 3 is a question about what would you say is your greatest talent or skill? Well, if someone's exceptional in a particular skill or a talent in some way, that probably is not so hard to find the words to just talk about it. Now, it would be helpful if you could sort of take it further and say, how have you developed and demonstrated that talent or skill? That's where maybe it takes a little bit of reflecting and digging in and thinking that through. I like the second question. I was, as a person myself thinking about going to college, I was a bit of a daydreamer and I was always thinking about interesting things. And I was getting into this moment where I would find different ways of expressing what I wanted to say. And so sometimes people think creative just means the arts, or it means drama, or it means something that is performance-based. But it could be that you have a creative way of solving problems and people let you know that you have an interesting way of approaching a decision that you have to make. Or maybe it's the way that you tell a story. There's so many ways that we can tap into a creative part of ourselves. So if you see creative and then you think, well, that's my other friend, that wouldn't be me, maybe take a little bit longer with that and think about that a little bit deeper. Anyway, there's lots of stuff here for you to think about, lots of opportunities for you to share. And I'm going to move on because I do want to save a lot of bit of time here for some more discussion about what could be good tips for you. Just to finish our side of this, though, should you have questions along the way with the UC application, including the personal insight questions, here are different ways to get that kind of help. There's phone number for the UC application help desk. They also have an email address, and also they have commonly asked questions, and that's a great place for you to find some general information about us. But let's move on the conversation to how it works when we're talking about Pomona College.
All right, thanks, David and Brian. I want to start this discussion, first of all, by really thinking about platforms. So we've already learned about the UC platform and the way in which they accept applications and the many universities in the system. Well, there are other kinds of platform systems. And so do think a little bit about that. Maybe you're using the Common Application. Maybe you're using the Coalition. Maybe you're using the Universal College Application, or maybe you're applying through QuestBridge. These are really important questions to think about because the platform does inform the application. Each one of these platforms has a slightly different version of the application, and it's really important to know which one are you using and how that platform might either be a reflection of the goals an institution has, or might be a way to create access and expand opportunities for many, many kinds of different students to apply through many different platforms. So do really think about that. At Pomona, we use the Common Application and the Coalition Application, and then we are also a QuestBridge partner. So I'm kind of giving a little free advertising here to Universal because we don't use them, but many schools do. And so think a little bit about that because I do think that's important. Next slide. And the next thing, and part of this gets to what I was talking about with the platform, right? This is key. Who's your audience? So when you're thinking about the various essays that you have, all essays, at least the ones I hope you're planning to write, have readers. And the reader is the audience member. Sometimes you're writing to an audience of one. Most of the time, you're writing to an audience of many. So a lot of times admissions offices, they don't have one person who's making every decision. They might make decisions in a committee, or they might make decisions with multiple people who are reviewing your file. And so your essay actually has many people in the audience. It also has an institution that is the audience. And so institutions, particularly small liberal arts colleges like Pomona, have a certain understanding of who might be a good fit and might be a good match. We don't serve all students well. We serve a kind of student well, we believe, and we're trying to match that fit in that with that student. And so the audience is important because we're making that decision after reading your perspective. So Common Application essays, the general essay, what many refer to as the college essay, that's a general audience, right? You're writing that once, you're submitting that usually on one platform to multiple audiences. As David and Brian said, and I encourage, you should apply to multiple institutions. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. And so you're going to have multiple people read that. So don't write how much you love Georgetown in your Common App general essay and then send it to Brown, right? That's not going to work. We really want to make sure that we know who the audience is. When it comes to specific questions, and keep putting your questions in the Q&A box, we really enjoy writing them. Some of those questions that we got earlier revolve around college-specific essays. Now, this is true for many colleges. Some schools will ask, why Chicago? Why Lewis and Clark? Why Chaminade? Great. Other schools will not ask that. And so don't think that you have to answer that question every single time. Make sure you read what the question is and then answer the question. So to the person who asked that question in the Q&A, the answer is not always. And so you may have a couple of essays ready for those institutions, but don't think that you can just copy and paste that into every single essay for every single institution, because some schools are not going to ask the why us question. So that's really important. The second piece is that has a very focused audience. So rather than a general essay, we have a really focused audience for that essay. It needs to be tailored to that institution and specific. We also have, and I think a lot of students underestimate how long this is going to take. Many schools have short answer questions. They have quick take or rapid response. And I'm even seeing now some schools are moving to a 2-minute video, which is more of a verbalized essay. Think about those things because they really do have an impact in how the admissions office discusses you and talks about you and thinks about you, but they're intentionally designed not to be 500 or 600 words. Some of these are 100 words, some are 200 words, some are 2 or 3 words if it's a quick take, or they just want to say, they just want you to know what's your favorite book, what did you do last Tuesday, pepperoni or no on your pizza. You know, these questions can get sounds like they're kind of silly, and sometimes they do sound a little silly, but they're also designed to bring out your personality. And so don't overthink those short questions. Don't sort of sit on them and get anxiety with them, but do make sure that you're answering the question as asked. And then really, I think the one thing that's important here, and I'll just kind of move to the bottom, is that question style is your friend, not your enemy. So, you know, one of Google's laws, Google has a couple of laws about the way they work. One of Google's laws is constraint creates creativity. And I love that because when you are constrained by the type of question, don't see that as your enemy. See that as the box in which you can be creative. And so do recognize that there are limits and limits have a purpose, and that can actually help you if you think about it strategically. And then finally, avoid the cut and paste. Don't write one essay and then apply to 15 schools and then just paste that in because you didn't spend enough time writing and you've got 3 days till the deadline. That's really, really not going to work. You're going to sound very generic, very sort of cut and dry, and you may even make a mistake in terms of the things that you put in the essay. You might talk about someone's engineering program and they don't even have an engineering program because you wrote it for another school that does. So really do not do that. Next slide.
Yeah, before we go on,
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to ask you a thought on something.
Yeah.
What do you think, you know, we're all talking about human nature here and doing this process. What do you think is behind that cutting and pasting and repurposing? Is it, I mean, one thought is that, you know, maybe it's just a shortcut and maybe it saves time. I think it's deeper than that. I wonder if you feel the same way. I think sometimes it's just we're just avoiding some deeper thinking and work because we don't know if this is what's needed and called for. So the easier thing is just to do the work that we've already done and just do it again and just plop it into another essay that we have to share.
Yeah, I also think it's that students don't do the research required and they approach colleges in a more generic fashion than colleges believe they actually are. Yes, many colleges have similarities, but institutions really want to be seen as individuals. And when you cut and paste and you sort of treat the process as generic, I think that's more a reflection of the fact that you see some of the schools and what they are telling you or what you're not really doing the deeper, taking the time to learn more deeply about them, you're approaching them in a generic way. And I think that's a really, I would say that's a no-no. Don't do that.
It's not giving the institution the respect it needs to from their side of it. Yes.
Right. Great. So in our last 2 minutes, these will be quick. So we did some UC prompts. I want to do the Common App prompts. I actually took the liberty of just highlighting these, and there are 7 of them, and I'm just going to read it out. Background, faced a challenge, challenged a belief, a problem you'd like to solve, personal growth, concept you find so engaging, any topic of your choice. That's essentially the questions distilled into the type so that you can understand the audience, so that you can write something specific, so that you can answer the question and make the college enjoy reading your essay. So really understand what's the question behind the question. Distill to something like what I've done here so that you're really getting to the essence and the heart of the issue. If you can't do that, this is what I did. I took all of that jumble of words I put it into a word cloud on the internet, and I got this. You want to know what the Common App questions prioritize in the answers? They want you to, they prioritize time, like, learn, reflect, one, share, personal. If all those keywords are resonating in your answer, you've done a good job. If you've taken the time, if you've shared some learning, if you've reflected, one, I take that as myself, you're talking about yourself and you're sharing something personal, you've got it. You are going to ace the essay. And then finally, I wanted to, I'm a big believer in readers are good writers. I personally read a lot, and I think that we are perhaps losing our passion for writing in this technology or reading for in this technological age. I really encourage you, be a reader, because readers are writers. And so I took some really famous writers who you may know, and I just found some quotes that they had given to the world on writing. And I'm calling this Writers in the Art of Writing. Alice Walker, who many of you may have read in high school, said, meditation has been a loyal friend to me and it has helped me write many books. What does that tell me? It tells me that reflection is important in writing. Elie Wiesel said to learn to respect the words that are heavy with their own past. Every word both separates and links. What does that tell me? It tells me that you should respect the language that you're writing in, that you should understand that words have power, words have meaning, and that's very true in essays. And Brandy Alani McDougall, a Hawaiian writer who teaches at UH Manoa, who I wanted to feature today, said, our kapuna recognized writing in various genres, especially when distributed, is a powerful technology that may be used to our own devices and to emphasize a distinctly indigenous aesthetic. What is she really saying there? Writing's personal. Writing can be really a powerful way to understand yourself. And so I would encourage you, and I'd leave you with that. Think before you write, understand that words have power, and make sure that you are the center of the writing you do.
That's awesome. Thank you. And by the way, anyone who decides to take these quotes and put them at the top of our PIQs, don't do that. You're going to know right away.
Yes,
that's where you got.
There you go.
So we have run out of time, but we hope that we could give you a few final tips. And my tip real quickly would just be start early. I mean, we need your application in November. And sometimes just because we're unsure about what to say and how to say it and how to start, we put it off. And then when we put it off, we don't give ourselves the time to do a decent job of writing and rewriting. So if you can get an early start on things, I think that's really going to be helpful to you. Adam, what are your thoughts on tips?
Yeah, in addition to that, I would just say, remember that you yourself should not be the only one reviewing your writing. Give it to a trusted friend, give it to a teacher, make sure that you circulate it, and even if it's a small circle, that's okay. Make sure that you are thinking about how others perceive it by creating an audience as you write. Don't turn in your first draft without anybody reading it.
Fantastic. Brian, anything you'd want to give as a tip?
Yeah, I just want to say that all of this is all about you. And I know in certain cultures, like for me being Asian, it's hard to kind of talk about yourself. And so the idea, though, is for the admissions counselor to know about you. It's easy to talk about, mom, dad, our situation, everything else outside of you. But it's really important to, again, make sure that at the end of the day, what is the reader learning about you specifically? And so take the time to be intentional about that.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you everyone for joining us. I hope this was valuable. I know it may not have answered every question you had. Today wasn't for us about telling you what to write. It was just getting to start thinking about how to write these answers, these essays. And I know Adam shared that with us, and I completely agree with that sentiment. So we hope that was helpful, and we wish you all the best with your college journey. And if we can be helpful to you in any way, you have our email addresses, and hopefully you can be in touch with us.
All right, thanks so much.
Thank you for joining us. When you close this window, there will be a link to a very quick 4-question survey. We'd appreciate any feedback you can provide. Also, this was just one of many sessions being hosted, so be sure to sign up for additional sessions at strivescan.com/Hawaii. In about a week, you'll be able to find this session's recording, as well as all the other session recordings at the same website where you registered. We'd like to thank again David, Adam, and Brian. Thank you so much for presenting today. We wish all of you well. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.